Hey everyone, welcome back. If you are doing research, you probably know that not all data comes as numbers. Sometimes it's words, stories, interviews, or even videos. And that is what we call qualitative data. But here is the thing, collecting qualitative data is just the first step. The real magic happens when you analyze it, when you turn all those interviews, observations, or written responses into insights that you can actually use. So today we are going to talk about qualitative research analysis. Just an overview. I will explain what it is and why it is different from analyzing numbers, the principles behind it, and then we will go deeper into the main types with examples that can actually make sense. So let's have a quick recap here. What is qualitative research analysis? Qualitative research is all about understanding people, experiences, and perspectives. Instead of asking how many students are stressed, you are asking why do students feel stressed and how does it affect their daily life? So analyzing qualitative data means you look for meaning in words, stories, or behaviors. Here you are not counting numbers. You are finding patterns, interpreting experiences, and making sense of what people are actually saying. So there are some key principles that go along with qualitative data analysis. The first one is inductive reasoning. So you start with observations and you gradually build understanding or even theories. Then another principle is context, the principle of context. So in qualitative data analysis, context matters. So the social, cultural, and personal context of your data gives it meaning, and you need to keep all this in mind. And there's also the principle of active engagement. When it comes to qualitative data, you really need to dive into that data. You need to read, listen carefully, and also watch closely. So you need to be actively engaged when it comes to qualitative data. Then the last key principle, which should be obvious, is subjectivity. Your interpretation of the data matters, but it should also reflect on your own biases to stay honest and accurate, because your biases affect the way you interpret the qualitative data that you have collected. So basically, analyzing qualitative data is like solving a puzzle. You take all the pieces, that is the words, the interviews, the notes, and figure out the bigger picture. So now let's go to the main topic of the day, the main types of qualitative analysis. I'll try to explain as best as I can in this possible time. So the first type of qualitative analysis is thematic analysis. And thematic analysis is all about finding patterns or recurring themes in your data. For example, you interview students about examination stress, and after reading all the responses, you notice repeated ideas that these students have talked about. For example, something like lack of sleep, pressure from parents, procrastination. These become your themes. Another example we can look at is you observe classroom behavior. So you are studying students in a classroom. You notice that students repeatedly raise their hands to ask questions when the lesson is confusing. So a theme that is recurring here could be seeking clarification when things are unclear. So the thematic analysis method is often flexible. It works for almost any type of qualitative data, and it is great when you want to understand what is common across experiences. Then the second type of qualitative data analysis is content analysis. Content analysis is all about categorizing and sometimes counting words or ideas. So this is more structured than a thematic analysis. For example, you analyze 50 online posts about, let's say, online classes, and you are going to count how many posts mention stuff like stress, motivation, and distractions. That is one example. Another example of the analysis could be, let's say you look at student essays about school lunch programs, and from those essays you categorize mentions or calls into healthy, unhealthy, or insufficient, and see which category comes up most. So you are looking at student essays about these school lunch programs, and you are going to categorize what they mention specifically into either healthy, unhealthy, or insufficient, and then you finally look at which category comes up most often. So content analysis usually helps you see patterns clearly, almost like turning words into measurable insights without losing their meaning. Then the third type of qualitative research analysis is a narrative analysis. Just like the name states, it is narrative. So narrative analysis focuses on stories. It's all about how people explain their experiences. For example, you interview first year students about adapting to university life. One person will say, I was overwhelmed at first, but then I joined the club, made friends, and felt more confident. Another person could also say, I procrastinated a lot, failed my first test, but learned to manage my time. So here you are looking at the people people's stories, the respondents, their stories. Another example could be you looking at the personal journals or diaries about a summer internship the interviewees have done. So here you analyze how each respondent describes their challenges and learning experiences. So under the narrative analysis, you are not just counting or even coding. You are understanding how these experiences unfold and what they mean to each person. Then another form of qualitative analysis is called discourse analysis. Discourse analysis is all about how language shapes reality. This is not just about what people say, it's about how they say it and what it reveals about the society or culture. For example, you analyze TikTok videos about remote learning. Some creators say maybe it is convenient, other people will say I feel isolated. And then you are going to study why different groups express different feelings and what they say about the student culture. Another example could be you looking at the news headline about gender roles in sports. So you study the language and framing to see how this news headline reinforces certain stereotypes about gender. So this is all about language. Discourse analysis is usually great for studying communication, social norms, or cultural attitudes. Then grounded theory analysis. If you want to know more about grounded theory, you should watch my previous video on qualitative research. Grounded theory is all about developing a theory directly from your data rather than testing an existing one. So for example, you interview people with chronic pain, and from their stories you notice patterns like coping strategies, support networks, and even emotional struggles. You then build a theory about how people adapt to chronic pain. Another example could be you studying new employees' adaptation to remote work. So patterns in their experiences can help you develop a framework explaining how support and communication affect work adjustments. So grounded theory is useful where there isn't an existing theory that explains what you are studying at the moment. Then another type of qualitative research analysis, this is often at times a bonus. This is interpretative phenomenological analysis, that is IPA. This is usually done for interpretative phenomenology. Refer to my previous video to know more about phenomenology. So IPA is about going very deep into an individual's experience. This analysis focuses on how people make sense of major life events. For example, you interview cancer survivors about their treatment journey, and then you explore how each of these people interpret their experience and its emotional impact. Another example is you interviewing students who change their courses or their majors. IPA helps you understand the personal meaning behind that decision. So this method usually involves small samples, but the insights are usually very rich and detailed. So that is it. Let's do a quick recap. Qualitative analysis helps you turn words and stories into meaningful insights. Thematic analysis helps you find patterns across data. Content analysis helps you categorize and count words or ideas. Narrative analysis helps you understand personal stories. Discourse analysis helps you study language and social meaning. Grounded theory helps you build a theory from your data, and IPA helps you go deep into individual experiences. So qualitative analysis isn't just looking at words, it's about understanding people, contexts, experiences in a way that numbers can show. And when this is done right, it gives you a very rich and nuanced understanding of your topic, whether it is for academics, business, or social research. That is all I have for today. All the best, and until we meet next time.